Since this is the first meeting of the working group, I thought I'd start with some of the basics. And the most important basic one is, why are we doing this? Why is the U.S. involved in this fight? Why should the U.S. continue to invest in fighting malaria in Africa? For one thing, because malaria may just be, as Bill Gates put it so well, the worst thing on the planet. As many as 500 million people suffer from malaria each and every year. Nearly 1 million people die from malaria each and every year. Most of its victims are infants and pregnant women. In fact, every 30 seconds, an African child dies of malaria. In economic terms, malaria costs Africa $12 billion in lost productivity. So as we all talk about how Africa can rise and meet its great potential, in my view, you can't get there unless you slay malaria deaths. Of course, sadly, there are many challenges out there. We all recognize that members of Congress and members of the Senate are called upon to make tough choices. They're called upon to be involved in great causes and to meet tough challenges that are out there. Well, what might make malaria different than those challenges, other than how many people it affects, is that because for the first time in our history, there really is a clear path to conquering malaria deaths. I mean, we can sit here today and lay out a path for how we're going to get to those goals of 2010 and 2015. In the short and medium term, the tools for fighting malaria, they're clear. They're proven. Long-lasting bed nets, access to artemisinin combination therapy, interventions like indoor residual spraying, access to medicines. In the longer term, as Christian will set out, great progress is being made in developing new treatments and new medicines and vaccines. Okay, so malaria is terrible, but we have developed effective tools. There's another reason why I think it's important for the U.S. to be involved in investing in the fight against malaria. There are success stories that we're seeing every single day arising out of the generosity of the American people. Now, a lot of people will toss around numbers. The fact that in places like Ethiopia, in just 2 years, malaria cases have dropped 60%. Malaria deaths have dropped over 50%. Largely because of the investments that have been made by this administration and the last administration and this Congress. But I really want you to think beyond the numbers. I mean, it's not the numbers, at least not for me, that get me motivated in this. It's faces, it's stories, it's village after village all across the continent that has seen its lot in life changed. They've seen lives lifted and communities built because they've taken this challenge on. Not so long ago, a group went back to Zanzibar, which is the islands of Zanzibar, part of Tanzania where I serve, and they came away full of amazing stories about what they had seen. There was one moment where they walked through a little hospital on Zanzibar, hospital that in Kiswahili is referred to as the One Coconut Tree Hospital, because legend has it the hospital was built on the spot where there was only one coconut tree standing after a storm had swept across. And as they were touring the hospital and walking through the wards, they walked through a pediatric hall. And they walked through it, and one of the visitors stopped and said, "Oh, wait a minute, your beds are empty." And the people who were working there were so accustomed to it that they hadn't occurred to them. Yeah, we have no malaria cases today. That person came back and referred to it as the empty bed syndrome that we should be talking about. The fact that we actually are clearing out hospital wards because of the successful path that we're taking, because of the progress that we're making in places like Zanzibar. There's another story, the story of the MEADS project, which I had the chance to see firsthand and help launch in my days as ambassador. The Malaria Early Epidemic Detection System. It's a pretty neat thing. Again, thanks to your generosity, we've been distributing mobile phones all over the islands. 53 different healthcare workers have them. And once a week, they text message in the number of positive tests that they have, or the lack of positive tests that they have, and they go into an automated server that's been provided by a mobile phone company, and they're able to plot the cases. And the reason they do that is that in just the last few years, the malaria prevalence rate has dropped to below 1%. And so now the battle that they're fighting is how to keep it out. Malaria is low, but they're watching day by day to make sure it doesn't flare up again. That's success. That's what success looks like. And that's what your generosity looks like. But it's beyond malaria itself, I think, another reason why it's important for us to stay involved. First off, there's a lot of talk here in Congress, rightly so, about taking on the great challenges to maternal and child health. And that very much is a cause that is beginning to gather momentum and to begin getting the attention it deserves. Fighting malaria in so many ways is the down payment on maternal and child health. If you take a look at the numbers, the number of infant deaths, the effects on pregnant women, malaria is staggering in its cost. Last year there were 881,000 malaria deaths in Africa. 85% of those were children under 5 years of age. As many as 10% of the pregnant women who die in Africa due to malaria. So if we're going to take up this cause, which I think we need to, in fighting the challenges of maternal and child health, malaria is a key component of that. Finally, the other reason why I think it's so important for us to be involved in this fight is for what malaria and success in fighting malaria means for America's image around the world. And it's something that, quite frankly, I never grow tired of talking about. I served as ambassador, as Peter said, in the United Republic of Tanzania. Beautiful country, marvelous, wonderful people. But it's a place that's seen its share of challenges over the years. When people would come and visit me at my embassy, they were quick to comment about how beautiful my new embassy was. And I was quick to remind them why I had a beautiful new embassy. Because 10 years before that, it had been struck by terrorists. And that fateful day in August, the bombing of the embassies in Nairobi and Dar es Salaam. Since then, I think we've awakened to the challenges of extremism. And one of the ways that we fight extremism is to show our involvement in the great challenges that are affecting struggling parts of the world. Poverty does not cause extremism. Absolutely does not. However, poverty can lead to despair. And despair and hopelessness are conditions that extremists know how to exploit all too well. If we as a people and we as a government can be seen as fighting those conditions that too easily fall into despair and hopelessness, good for us. That's the image I think we want to have. And I think malaria, taking on malaria, something that Africans know very well we don't get and haven't had in decades, I think that shows America's compassion. And again, to me, that's precisely where we want to be. It is, in my view, no coincidence that in nearly every speech that President Obama has given on the African continent, or any speech that Secretary Clinton has given on the African continent, malaria almost always gets the mention. If you go back to President Obama's Cairo speech, and the talk about how people from all faiths can work together on great causes, malaria is there. So, beyond just the obvious health challenges and health benefits of our fight, the fact that we are working together to take on challenges that affect struggling parts of the world, that we're having success, that we're building relationships and building programs and building tools, that to me is one of the smartest investments that we can make. And so for all of those reasons, that's why we do this. That's why it's important to keep doing it.